Hello, Eagles Nation. Vincent Foast here, and welcome to a Week 11 Eagles chat, where the Eagles were able to get the job done once again as their offense looked as confused as one of those people who waits in a fast food line for 50 minutes, only to get to the front of the line and not know what in the world they're trying to order. That's the perfect way to describe the Birds' offense yesterday, but hey, they were able to get the job done. They improved to 8-2. They're now back on top of the NFC conference once again. Maybe I should just shut my mouth and enjoy the victory, or should I? Well, we're about to get into it in a matter of moments here, coming up on Eagles Chat. But before we do so, make sure you like and subscribe to the Eagles Chat YouTube channel, as well as following us on Instagram at Chat Eagles, where you can find daily updates on your Birds. You can also find our Instagram in the description of this Eagles Chat video. But now let's get right into it. And as always, we're going to start off with the injury update. Now, in this week's injury update, we have two big-time players both going to the Eagles offensive line. And yes, you can probably already guess who the first one is, and that is, yes, the big-time Pro Bowler right tackle Lane Johnson for the Birds. Now, he was said to be ruled out at halftime with a foot injury. Now, yes, folks, he was coming off an injury in last week's game against the Green Bay Packers. Well, he was kind of questionable at once. He was kind of taken out on the cart, right? And then he returned. Well, he didn't return this week, and that foot injury seems to be a little more serious than the injury that he sustained last week. And this is something where he's said to be out 4 to 6 weeks. So it doesn't seem to be season ending just yet. That's the reports that are coming out. Now, apparently, compared to Rappaport, who reported this on his X account, said that Lane Johnson will be looking to seek for a second opinion on his injury, looking for more tests. But this likely will land him on IR, but believes it is not season ending. Again, that was by Rappaport from X, a very reliable source. And this is something where, again, great to see that it's looking like it may not be the end of Lane Johnson's season, but still not great to see. Now, of course, Fred Johnson was filling in for Lane Johnson at that position and was not doing too bad, but still, seeing the Eagles' record without Lane Johnson in the past is not all that great. So never nice to see Lane Johnson go down, especially being out for a substantial amount of time, especially as we all know what happens, folks. After Thanksgiving, football gets down and dirty real in a big-time way. So hopefully Lane Johnson can come back when it really gets important. Hopefully the Eagles by that time don't go down the toilet, right? But we're going to move on next now to Cam Jurgens, the center for the Birds, as he sustained an injury back in Week 7 against the Minnesota Vikings, coming off a knee injury. Well, Cam Jurgens, unfortunately, got another injury during yesterday's performance, and this is something where it's listed as an undisclosed injury. Not too much information has come out of it, but he was taken out in the fourth quarter for that injury, and then Brett Toth filled back in for them. And you can probably see the little bit of a difference there when Brett Toth came in, was the offensive line was starting to fold a little bit. But even when all the Eagles starters was in, yeah, that didn't change much. Even when all their starters were in, the offense still was not performing at a very, very high level. I'm sure all of you saw that. I saw it. And it's something where we'll get into the offense in a little bit. Stay tuned. That will be coming up in a matter of moments on Eagles Chat. But let's start getting into the nitty-gritty. We're speaking of the nitty-gritty. Well, how about we get into it? And we're going to first start off with the defensive spotlight. Now, this is something where I have to mention these two guys off the bat. Nakobe Dean, Jaelan Phillips. These were two guys that were absolutely all over the place, and something where, ever since the trade deadline, first starting off with Jaelan Phillips, this is a guy where, especially not just in last game, but prior in Green Bay, had one heck of a game and was noticeable on the field. And 100%, once again, he was noticeable in this game. And Phillips, had 5 tackles, a sack, and 4 QB pressures in yesterday's performance. This guy was all over the field, and we saw what was going on with Jared Goff. He was folding big time under pressure, and Jared Goff is known to fold big time under pressure. Just in this history, this is something where you get good pressure. Again, like the Eagles said, I'm using pressure a lot here, but that was definitely the key in the Eagles' success. That word right there, you're going to hear that a lot coming up in this Eagles Chat, was a big reason why they were able to stop one of the best offenses in the league, being the Detroit Lions. They came into this game averaging 31.4 points per game. That was their season average in points. And this is something where, absolutely incredible what the Eagles were able to do to hold them below the double-digit mark. This is something quite incredible to see. And, Jaelan Phillips, again, one heck of a player, one heck of an outing. And for his first time playing at the Lincoln Financial Field in the beautiful midnight green jerseys, it was one heck of a show to put in front of the Philly faithful in South Philadelphia last night. That I can tell you. But still, looking over at it, and now moving on to, our next guy, not to get off topic, but now moving on to Nakobe Dean, a linebacker, who, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me on this, is my defensive player of the game, which is why he is on the defensive spotlight. But I have to give him that title as the Eagles Chat defensive player of the game and possibly the defensive player of the game. Now, I understand, yes, a lot of contributors, right? Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, we're going to get into that coming up in a matter of moments here on Eagles Chat. But still, Nolan Smith, one heck of an outing yesterday, and I'll tell you why, and why exactly I'm saying that he is my defensive player of the game. What stood out was not just his downhill work overall, as he fills up the A and B gaps, right? We know that. But this is something where his overall development in terms of sticking with some of their top guys, some of the Lions' top weapons on offense. And yes, when I mean top weapons, I'll go right to it. Jahmyr Gibbs, he stuck with him a couple of times yesterday. He also stuck with Jameson Williams. So yes, when I mean top big-time weapons for Detroit on offense, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, he only had 3 tackles, and he also had a sack where that one sack was incredible. He pretty much absolutely trucked the Detroit offensive line to get the Goff right there. But, I mean, overall, yes, 3 tackles, 1 sack. You may look at those stats and say, Vince, why in the world are you picking this guy for your defensive player of the game? Don't get me wrong, he played well, but why are you picking him? Well, his ability to play all over the field. As a linebacker, sometimes you're going to be in the secondary. Sometimes you're going to be up on the line, helping out your defensive line, clogging those gaps. And that's exactly what Nakobe did yesterday. It was absolutely incredible to see, and it was a smooth play. And again, yes, when he covered Jahmyr Gibbs, I'll say this. When he covered Gibbs, it wasn't like he was covering Gibbs for about 20 or so yards. They were short, runs, right? But overall, he took those options off the chart completely for Jared Goff and was forcing Jared Goff all night to get rid of the ball in a lot of situations faster than he originally wanted to. There were many times Detroit's offense was designed for that ball to come out of the pocket at a specific time, and the Eagles were forcing Jared Goff to release it at a time he was not wanting to. And there were many times where you looked at it, when he released the ball, it was either way out in front of his receiver, or there were many times where he was getting pressured so much that the accuracy wasn't there. There were a couple times he threw behind his receiver. And there were times, again, Jameson Williams was open. He threw behind his man. So this is something where, again, I know I'm getting a little bit into the defensive line now, but Nakobe Dean was a big portion, a big piece of those pressures and why Jared Goff had the game that he had yesterday, why Goff had so many pressures. And again, like I said, Goff's history against Philly isn't exactly great. He is 1-5 against Philadelphia all time. And this is something where last night, Jared Goff went 14 for 37, or only 255 yards. So he had the yards there, had a couple of big plays. But this is something where, yes, he hit Jameson Williams with that 40-yard score that tied the game at 6. Remember when the game was extremely boring? Yeah, well, it was kind of, offense-wise, it was boring the whole game, if you want to put it in that perspective. But still, they were able to hold Goff exactly where they wanted them to. And this is something where a big-time victory is claimed, and the defense did their job, and the defense was the force on why they got the victory, obviously. But now, speaking of the pressure, and this is something where, you already know I can't ignore it much longer. I can't hold it back much longer here on Eagles Chat. We already got to get into it, and that is the pressure. And specifically, you already know where I'm going when I mention pressure for the Birds, and we already know, right here. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. This duo, absolutely incredible, and I'm sure many of you have seen the stat already. Combined 5 batted down passes in yesterday's performance. Again, getting in Goff's face, forcing him to release it. Not at the release point that Goff wanted it to be at, and therefore there's your block pass. This is something where the Eagles were in their face the entire game, was in Goff's face to be specific, the entire game. The Detroit offensive line didn't know who to cover at which specific time. Brandon Graham also had a couple of key opportunities yesterday where, yes, he didn't get some of those big plays that I know Graham wanted to, sack 55 in other words, right? But there were also times where Brandon Graham, great pressure. There were a lot of times he kind of pushed two Detroit offensive linemen into each other, which kind of led into the sack, which allowed Brandon Graham's teammates to get to their destination, which was Jared Goff. So many times last night was just incredible to see. And this is something where, yes, a lot of people were saying the problem with the Detroit Lions was, yes, Mike Campbell. We know how aggressive he is, especially going for it on 4th down. And yes, the Lions, well, they tried that quite a few times, and they failed to convert on 5 4th down attempts. 5. The Eagles defense came up strong, and one of those attempts was a fake punt, if you remember that one. And the Eagles sniffed it out perfectly fine. They were able to stop it, and they were able to clog up the middle. The attempt was kind of awful. All they really did was they snapped the punt real quick. It didn't go back exactly where they, where the Eagles, I guess, was assuming were expecting it to go, and they tried to do a quick snap and run it forward the plow for the first down. Yeah, breaking news. They didn't get it. So that's exactly what happened. 5 attempts, the Eagles denied every single one of them, and they didn't do much better on third down. They were 3 of 13 on third downs conversions for the Detroit Lions. 3 for 13. So these are incredible stats. Again, not for the Lions, obviously, but for the Birds to be able to basically be able to shut down an offense again that was 31.4 points averaging coming into this game. I had multiple different people, even at my radio station that I'm with, tell me, yeah, Eagles aren't stopping them. Detroit Lions are a tank of a offense. Mike Campbell's going in there. He's sniffing blood. He's gonna. I mean, they're not scared of Philly. They're not this. They're not that. I was hearing it all week. People texting me. I had opposing teams, to be specific. Some Dallas people texting me this. So yes, you already know how that probably worked out, right? But still, had multiple people talking to me, running their mouth this week about how the Eagles defense was going to have so much issues with this juggernaut offense of the Detroit Lions. Again, everyone talks big about the Eagles until they have to play them, and this is exactly the result that happens pretty much the majority of the time, where they're shut up in a matter of moments, but they'll still find a way to hate because it's the Philadelphia Eagles. No one gets shut up until they win either the Super Bowl, and then people still don't shut up. So it is how it is. Yes, if you're a new Philly fan, you'll have to get used to it, right? We already know. But still, one heck of a game. Again, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, all over the place. Beautiful play, and great to see the two big men, especially the two big-time leaders, and the guys, the newer generation here, leading the way. Great to see these two guys having a great game, especially how Jalen Carter started the year, and Jordan Davis wasn't exactly the strongest things in the world at the beginning, and the strongest starts, I should say, most likely. But they were able to turn it around and have one heck of a performance yesterday. Great to see the two big guys showing up in big time colors in front of the Philly faithful. No better place in South Philly. But let's move on now to, yes, we were all positive, right? We were all jumping up and down. I was happy talking about this one. Now I have to depress myself because we got to talk about a guy that currently some of the Eagles fan base is probably on a manhunt for, and that is Kevin Patullo. Now, if you notice, I have Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni right next to each other. And this is something where you already know where I'm going with this. You can see it on the board, play calls. I'm not going to bore you too much with this because we all know what the actual issue is, right? I'm not going to, rant for 1,000 years on this, but this is something where the Eagles overall gaining 272 yards on this game, only 3.9 yards per play. And this is an offense that leads the NFL in terms of being in the red zone, scoring when in the red zone. And that stat specifically is more than 80% of the time the Eagles are in the red zone, they usually come up with a score. And with a score, meaning not a field goal, but a touchdown. Yes, you guessed it. Good job, right? But this is something where they went 1 for 3 in the red zone against the Detroit Lions. And this is something where I understand there were a lot of different issues. The first 2 passes of the game for the Eagles offense were drops by Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. Not a great start for the Eagles offense. Okay, we understand that, right? There were also mistakes made by Hurts, bad throws, overthrown balls, underthrown balls. There were times where there was a long ball to A.J. Brown that was overthrown out the back of the end zone. In my opinion, I'm kind of glad it was overthrown because A.J. Brown was in double coverage. Again, forcing it to Brown. That's a whole nother thing, right? But still, the big issue I had with the Eagles offense yesterday was this specific play. Cooper DeJean, an incredible interception. Again, defense, incredible job getting pressure on Jared Goff. He got it out of the pocket. Oh no, Cooper DeJean's there. Here he is again. Here comes Coop, right? We saw it back in the Super Bowl last year. Now here comes Cooper DeJean once again. We couldn't unfortunately return it for a touchdown, but returned it in an area where it was respectable, where the Eagles should have been able to walk in and completely punch the Lions in the gut. Again, putting a team down, something the Eagles haven't done a great job of doing this year, but still, that's the play that haunts me. Cooper DeJean, an incredible interception, sets him up inside the 15-yard line, way inside the red zone. Surely the Eagles would be able to get a touchdown here. Surely they would be able to expand here and, again, get a huge punch in the gut for the Detroit Lions to really send them down, the Broad Street crying, right? That's exactly what was supposed to happen here. Well, it didn't. The Eagles went 1, 2, 3 and settled for a field goal. Wasn't even close enough to feel comfortable going for it. Again, that's a problem. Inside the 15-yard line, and you don't go for it. You don't go for that touchdown. And I'm not saying, I have to restate my words, not go for it in terms of going for it on 4th down. because God forbid they did that a couple times back at the 29-yard line where the tush push was denied twice in a row, 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. That's another thing, trying to stay on topic here, right? But the fact you weren't able to get a touchdown inside the Detroit 15-yard line, a beautiful field setup, right? Cooper DeJean, great interception. You couldn't get the job done right there. That's a problem. That's a big-time problem. Where are the RPOs at? Where are those slant passes? There was nothing yesterday to get the Eagles even in a rhythm. This is a problem. This is something where the play design, there were multiple different times where you saw the Eagles set up and they looked completely confused. There were guys that looked like they were on totally different pages. There were many different times where the ball was thrown to a receiver and he wasn't even looking the right direction. He wasn't even expecting it yet. These are problems that just can't continue. And this is an offense that shows absolutely no leadership. When I see an offense out there that is not on the same page, the ball is being thrown out quicker than it's supposed to be, or the ball is being thrown out at a point in time where your receivers don't even know when the ball is coming. That's a problem. If I see an offense that's not on the same page like that and that discombobulated, that's a lack of leadership in terms of the offense in general. And there is no leadership. And this is something where this is why I have Nick Sirianni as well on this slide, because you're the head coach. You got to get this under control. This can't keep happening week after week. And yes, I'm starting to get nervous about this because this is starting to feel like exactly how it was with that 2023 season where the Eagles were winning big-time games. Remember, they beat the Chiefs that year at Arrowhead Stadium. They beat the Buffalo Bills in a nail-biter in overtime, right? They were beating good teams in that 2023 season, but they were barely winning games, and they weren't winning games with fashion. They were winning games with a nail-biter every single time. So, yes, in that season in 2023, they were beating good teams, but you felt like something was still not on there, and eventually it collapsed, and it was figured out. Your defense, I know they're talented, they're incredible, but they're not going to be able to hold offenses down every single time. I know they're great, but they're not going to be able to come up with this. They're going to get tired eventually. You can't keep doing this. Eventually, that defense is going to get worn out, and they're going to fall apart in a very high clutch situation. Again, they're talented. I don't want to put any disrespect on their name. But if your defense is constantly on the field because your offense comes out and does a 3-and-out or gets one first down and then completely dies, and your defense comes out, there's like no momentum there. They come back out in the field. What did we just defend? We defended for our offense to come out in the field, forget their last name, and then get off the field again. It's just something that can't happen. And the lack of leadership again. I understand Hurts didn't play the greatest at all yesterday, and there were plays that were on Hurts. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to shift the blame around completely. Hurts made some bad plays. He was not on last night. I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to say it. I'm not afraid to say it. Hurts was not a great game at all. It was not a great game. But still, your receivers, there were multiple times they did not come down with the ball. I understand it was cooler, but still, there were multiple times your receivers didn't come down with the ball. But still, in clutch situations, the play calling was just not there. The rhythm was just not there. There were many times where, again, Detroit was clogging up the box. They were stacking the box. There were also times where the Eagles were starting to get some RPOs going, and they were starting to work. That touchdown where Saquon Barkley, he ran it in, and we thought it was a touchdown. It was reviewed. It said it wasn't, but then Hurts made the tush push to get it in. That drive right there, there were some good plays. There was the fake to Saquon Barkley. Hurts would go over and do a dot over the center to Dallas Goedert, and they would get into a rhythm with the short pass moving downfield. It started to work again. That's what we saw out of the Eagles last season. But then again, it would fall apart. The next drive, we'd go right back to stage one once again to where we don't even know how a pro NFL offense works. It's just a constant circle where, again, it was like that Brian Johnson offense. You would see areas of light, and then right when you saw the area of light, it would combust, and then you'd be back at level one once again. It's just no rhythm, and it's something where, again, it's just not there. And yes, this was the 11th consecutive win in November for the Eagles dating back to 2022. And this month they're known to be good, right? I don't want to put too much on them, right? But there's also another stat where the Eagles are 6-0 this season when Hurts throws for less than 200 yards and Saquon Barkley, again, gained 83 yards with 26 carry. But the focus on this, Hurts threw for less than 200 yards. Once again, they're 6-0 this season with that. That's great. That's wonderful. But eventually, something's going to collapse. Something's going to break. And I know your schedule gets a little easier now, right? You have the Dallas Cowboys coming up next, right? Then you have the LA Chargers a little bit down the road after that Chicago Bears Friday game, Black Friday game, right? But still, this is just, it can't continue to happen because I know myself and I know a lot of other Eagles fans just can feel something's going to come up with eventually where this whole offense, this whole thing is about to break, combust, and explode in front of our eyes once again. And I know everyone has PTSD from that 2023 season, and I have a feeling there's a big opportunity and a big chance that same thing can happen again here. Don't like to say it, but I just have that feeling, and I don't like that feeling at all. Hopefully, I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong. That is not the case. We'll just have to watch and see. But now, moving on to a situation where we have Jalen Hurts, right? And this is something where we all know that what was going into this this coming week, right? The whole situation with AJ Brown. As Brown's production obviously has seriously declined this season, as he was targeted literally last week just 3 times. And this is something where he stood by his previous complaints. AJ Brown at the end of this game, and he, wanting more targets, but he finished with 7 catches for 49 yards. And this is something where he said, quote, "It was me trying to help contribute. That's all," is what Brown said. One of his big time quotes right at the end there. He just wants to contribute. Well, Jalen Hurts this game, the pass game wasn't necessarily there. Again, it wasn't a great start for the pass game when your first 2 passes were drops. And yes, who made the first catch of the game? Well, it was AJ Brown. So that was kind of something where if he didn't make that catch, who knows what in the world would have happened at Lincoln Financial Field. I have a feeling some boos may have came down. But Jalen Hurts, 14 for 28 for 135 yards, again, below that 200 point, like I just mentioned. QB rating of 66.88. So this is kind of that roller coaster of the season that we were kind of just talking about. Back in week 7 against the Minnesota Vikings, Jalen Hurts had a perfect passer rating. He almost repeated that again against the New York Giants the following week. Now here we are at 66.88 for his QB rating. Literally, nothing better to describe a roller coaster of a season than that stat right there. Kind of crazy, but yes, Hurts was an up and down game. Wasn't the best game of the season, not going to lie. As bad as some of the play calls were in clutch situations and how the offense wasn't really on the same page, there were a lot of times where, yes, some of the throws by Hurts were way off. I understand wind was a factor. It was a heck of a windy day yesterday, big time. Just be glad that Jake Elliott was able to punch the field goal kicks that he was able to, again, punch through. So congrats to Jake Elliott. Got to give him a shout out right there for those big time points, right? But still, Jalen Hurts, I understand it was windy yesterday, but still, some of those, even though some of those short passes were not exactly entertaining to watch, and it was kind of concerning at times. Again, for getting the offense in a rhythm was not helping one bit. But we'll see what happens coming up in this upcoming Sunday. And you can probably already guess where I'm going to go. Yes, the Eagles taking on the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. And yes, you can already tell by that helmet logo, the Eagles will be wearing their Kelly green uniforms. They're undefeated ever since they brought the Kelly green uniforms back. So it would be so beautiful to sweep the Cowboys in the Kelly green uniforms once again. They did so last year as they swept them in Kelly green. Let's see if they can do it this year, but this time in Dallas, it would be so sweet to see. Keep that undefeated record going, and no better team to do it than against the 1-star rated Dallas Cowboys. Sunday, November 23rd, not a primetime game, 4:25 p.m., middle of the Sunday football events, right? So we'll see exactly what happens. Hopefully the Birds can get the job done. A beautiful sweep of Dallas would be nice. 2 years in a row, we'll just have to see. We'll put our thoughts and prayers forward, right? We'll put our thoughts and prayers forward. That's all for me for this Week 11 Eagles chat. Have a good week, everyone. Let's enjoy this victory, or at least try to enjoy this victory over the Detroit Lions, right? And you already know what's coming up next. Go Birds! Have a good week, everyone. We'll see you back here next week to cover the Eagles-Dallas game next Sunday. Have a good one.